All right, guys, this is Roderick Carter for HouseOfAtProductions.com. This video, we're going to be talking about transferring your old MIDI files over into Cubase so you can breathe some life into them. All right, because different computers or different sequencers have different ways of doing this, I can't really go over each and every system. But basically, you want to set your MIDI sequencer, whether it's coming from a Korg keyboard or Roland keyboard or Yamaha motif or an external sequencer. I used to have I think it was called a Q7 or a QX7, Yamaha QX7 years ago. And man, I did many songs on that. Well, if I wanted to dump those sequences into Cubase, this is what we need to do. First of all, the sequencer needs to be set to slave mode. That is as simple as going in and setting the synchronization in the sequencer to external versus internal. Now make sure you write down your tempo of the song so you can put that into Cubase later on. Okay, so you're going to set your keyboard or whatever sequencer you have to external sync. You want to make sure also that the time code or synchronization is set to MIDI clock or MIDI time code. Just depends on what type of device you're using. It could be an MPC or whatever type of device you're setting. You want it to external sync, and you also want it to receive MIDI time code and or MIDI clock. You also want to make sure that the different MIDI channels that you're using are sending when the sequence plays back. You want to send it in Omni mode. Do not select a MIDI channel. You want to send it in Omni mode, meaning send all channels out simultaneously. Okay? Then you want to connect two MIDI cables. Of course, MIDI out of your sequencer to the MIDI in of your Cubase, whatever interface you're using, and the MIDI out of your Cubase MIDI interface into the input of the sequencer. Okay, MIDI input on the sequencer. Once you've done that, then we can start doing some things in Cubase. One thing you might want to do in Cubase is to go ahead and set the tempo to whatever tempo the sequence originally was. So if it was at 95 beats per minute, go ahead and put that in. Okay. The other thing you want to do is come up here in Cubase to transport and look for a section that deals with project synchronization. Just depends on what version of Cubase that you're using. Your time code source, of course, will be internal, because remember, Cubase is going to be the master. Okay. We're not using MIDI machine control or MIDI machine control input, so you can skip that. Your MIDI timecode destination needs to be going out to your MIDI interface, and you can select MIDI timecode follows the project time. Also, your MIDI clock destinations in Cubase need to go out as well to your MIDI out interface, and you can have MIDI clock follows project position and always send a start message. That will allow Cubase to start the project. Then once you've done that, we can come and go ahead and make a MIDI track. You only need one. We're going to capture everything on one track. Now, when you're recording MIDI from another device, it's best to go ahead and mute it. Go ahead and set your record, and over here in the inspector, if you are using Cubase 6 and above, you may have to click on this guy up here at the top, and you may have to select the inspector in order for it to show. Okay. Then over here, you're going to have your MIDI inputs, your MIDI outputs, and your MIDI channel. When you're recording, go ahead and set your MIDI input to all MIDI inputs. but set your output to not connected. This prevents you getting doubled notes. You want to disconnect that so that Cubase does not send this MIDI information back out to the sequencer and play the instrument that's being coming in. So you don't, in other words, you don't want MIDI feedback. You don't want MIDI to loop right back out, come back all the way back around, come back in, go all the way back around, come out in a loop fashion. That will create a nightmare for you. The other thing you want to do is we want to make sure the MIDI track that you're recording on from an external MIDI sequencer is set to any. That way it will record not only the MIDI data, what notes are being played, but it will also record what MIDI channel that information is coming on. And then of course, if you look at my other video on how to bust that up, then you will, you will see why we're doing it this way. So you only need one MIDI channel to capture everything. Once you're ready to go, just hit record on Cubase. It should start the sequencer, and you should start to see MIDI notes jumping around over here, and you should start to see MIDI data showing up in your MIDI record window. Since I no longer have a external MIDI sequencer, I can't really show you the information, but that's how you do it.